Thank you for attending today's session. Today's subject is RPA, the gateway to success in your finance transformation. Really appreciate your time attending, and we hope to add value to the time you spend with us. The session is based on a panel discussion, so we have a rock star of experts on our panel today. Okay, just to frame up the session is aimed at CFO and commercial executives, not so much the tech savvy, but the commercial business execs seeking to learn how to drive business improvement in your operation. Some of you might be very experienced at this, some of you might be less experienced and seeking to learn more. So hopefully we can give you some practical insights and takeaways to help you on your way. Let me introduce the panelists. First panelist, Peter Wilton. Peter Wilton is an experienced CFO and company director. Peter has held senior roles with a number of large companies, including Qantas and Castrol. Peter has also implemented major finance systems in medium and large corporates as both business sponsor or project director. Anne Parks. Anne is an experienced project manager and finance business analyst. She is a qualified CPA, practicing for some years as a management accountant. And she tells me she wanted to spend more time fixing the problems than being in the problem. And so Anne is very focused on addressing the challenges of experienced by finance teams in her current occupations and direction in her work. Anne has worked on major ERP upgrades and more recently led multi-year business improvement programs in finance that have been largely underpinned by robotic process automation. And thirdly, Andrew Waters. Andrew is Transformation Program Director with BTP Australia. Andrew is an accomplished business transformation professional, a qualified trainer in Lean Six Sigma, black belt, and has led major programs of work delivering significant improvement and cost takeout. Andrew's most recently led a successful program in the asset infrastructure space, delivering, again, multi-billion-dollar savings as part of a broader program. And I'm Ian Dunn. I am the chair for the session today. I am founder and managing director, BTP Australia. Our specialty is business improvement underpinned by the pillars of business advisory and delivering automation solutions aligned to the clear and concise objectives and challenges that we identify in our customer business operations. Okay, that is the introductions. Just in terms of, just to position the approach today, we'll do a quick level set around RPA. What is it? How does it work? And how does it apply to finance? We'll look at some examples. We'll look at some of the core capabilities and wrap up with some case studies. We'll then talk about the wider context of business improvement and finance transformation, the challenges of the CFO, and where RPA fits in the scheme of things. And then we'll wrap up with some key success factors around, ingredients that are helpful to consider when executing on a business improvement program. First question, rhetorical somewhat, but what is RPA and how does RPA work? I'll direct this question firstly to Anne. Anne, can you just help us understand what we're talking about here?
Yep, thanks, Ian. So RPA, or Robotics Process Automation, I guess it sounds a bit more complicated than what it is, but essentially it is software. And that software is easy to make and build software robots that can emulate human interactions. So from the front end, and so across digital, so whether it's a email or an ERP, that we can program the RPA to automate process steps.
Where do those process steps come from, Anne?
RPA is particularly strong around structured data. So generally there is input into it, and I'll take you through a couple of examples in a minute. But I guess the thing about RPA is it does use the front end of systems. So you can use any of your existing systems. So whether it's email, file servers, ERP systems, it can do a whole lot of steps that essentially the best way to think about it is if you've got a user and they're doing something in a system, and it's a repeatable, and you can define the rules, you could use RPA to automate it. So we'll step you through some examples of where it can be used. So this particular example is EFT processing. So the power of RPA really comes into where there's high volume, repeatable manual process steps. So this is a little example around EFT processing. So we've got an input, which in this particular example is the remittance advice, and it's coming into Zendesk. And then the as is a person is picking up and then doing different steps and entering data and processing that through. What we can do is automate it using RPA, and all the information is on the remittance advice. So the robot, once we define the rules, can pick up and process that through. So that is a really good example of repeatable manual processes that now a robot can do, and then they can just be checked at the end by a human.
Okay. And can I just add something here? One thing that's really nice with that example is that it shows how RPA can take a single piece of data, a single document, and update multiple systems. So you've got a legacy system there where a spreadsheet needs to be updated. There's other legacy systems plus an ERP, and it's updating all of those at the same time. And that's a particular strength of RPA.
Absolutely.
It works with that tangle of systems that may exist within an existing organization without having to untangle it straight away.
Yeah, and that's one of the really powerful things with it is that you're not changing your current systems because maybe you can't, but you can just look at it and go, right, what are steps that we can change and automate so that someone actually doesn't have to do that work and they can do other work.
Yeah. Particularly powerful.
I think an additional element to this as well is that you can see the value in what it does. The orange line tells you, well, that's what the software will be able to do. But I think one of the things that's key and value to this is realizing what are the impact of this. There's 3.5 people working just on processing this, and then in a very busy organization, those resources can be released to do more value add work rather than this, EFT processing, which is very mundane and very simple and very repetitive work. So you get, any finance professional who has the ability to have staff released to do additional tasks is always a real win.
Absolutely. It's also can create a faster turnaround with processing, which is especially when a business is growing and the volumes are going up, I think it can be really powerful.
Yeah. I imagine the month-end close is pretty sort of highly impacted positively here.
Yeah. Because often in a finance function, the crunch time is around that month end. So, if there's things that can be shorten the time for processing, then that is always a win.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay.
Just go to the next slide.
Yep.
Yeah. So another example where RPA is powerful is AP processing. So in this particular example, the invoice comes in and it would come into an email address typically, and then the RPA process can be run, and then it will just monitor the queue. It will read the invoice data, and then it will extract it, and then can log into the ERP and enter the data. And one of the key things with RPA to understand is it's essentially like a digital person or a digital user. So, you have to set up the RPA robot and assign security and access to it. So you can very well control, and it uses the front end. So it's a very kind of simple, powerful, and you can very easily see it controlled.
Actually, one thing while you're on that slide, Ian, that I'd like to add, one thing that RPA can also do, if you wanted to, is to check that invoice, not just read it and enter it into your ERP, but I can imagine if that was a whole lot of items of inventory or things like that, which needed price check, you could have your RPA check the prices before it was entered into your ERP. You could do all sorts of things to it, which streamlines that processing of that invoice more, in addition to just getting it into the ERP.
Maybe to the next case study here. To Peter's point, here's I guess an example of a retail distribution customer of ours. These are all processes that are implemented. One was Bankrec. Again, I guess a good example of how an automation can not just remove a manual problem. The problem here was the Bankrec was manual, and franchise stores were using headquarters as a bank, not paying their bill, letting their credit limit go past the threshold. And so they were blocked on their sales orders. So not only was it the manual effort and a waste of time of a person to sort of be manually going through that, but there was a pile of downstream impact in terms of the credit hold. Okay, the second one, as to your point, freight charges. These guys shipped a lot of containers internationally, and they have about 2,000 line items across their invoices each month that they need to check, and that was a manual process and highly laborious. In fact, sometimes the process wasn't done, and so wherever there was a discrepancy, that would be missed. So these are, I guess, just some examples here. And you look at the Bankrec, you look at the bank, the freight charges, and some elements of customer data. All of these are addressed by fundamental sort of base RPA solutions. The outcome, really freeing up 2 to 3 people to be able to do more valuable work in the organization. That is the typical benefit of how automation can impact a business. There's always very, very specific impacts quite often in how an automation allows people to be unblocking problems and contributing more constructively. So that's one example there. Have I missed anything on that one? All good?
I think you covered all of the main areas there. Again, I think again, solving your critical business problems by fairly low cost and ease to implement solutions with the existing infrastructure not changed at all, just to free up resources and increase the speed of processing has been a major win point for our customers. Yeah.
And these solutions, probably also worth noting just how incremental they are. These things have typically been, a 4-week solution build, 4 to 5 weeks in the majority, and a week or 2 of design. So quite tight incremental investment for quite immediate gain. And these were, I guess, all of these were good examples of that. I might just jump to the next one. This was a local government customer. Again, a lot of work in the finance space and some of the periphery around data quality in the ERP. Just some really interesting stories here. I won't go through all the detail, but the classic story here was the ERP was not fit for purpose. There was a vendor who was probably not as strongly managed as they could have been, and therefore functionality that was normal was not always in place, and so it was really people working as slave to a defective ERP. one of the things arising there was the lack of their ability to do the bank rec and correlate invoicing across a range of services to the right account. So typically developers were calling council to seek where their service was, and the council was saying, you haven't paid your bill. They had paid their bill, and the whole thing would escalate to letters of demand and legal dispute, when the fact the whole time the person seeking service had paid their bill. So you've got all the inefficiency of the dynamics in-house, which was ultimately ineffective because the data wasn't arriving in the right place and rippling all the way out to the end customer, who was receiving letters of demand. So it's quite comical when you sort of say it out loud, but that is the kind of thing, just real silly things prevail that can be easily mopped up here, and this is a good example.
Yeah, so just to discuss just essentially how RPA works is, and basically it emulates a person executing a manual repetitive task. So, the way to think about it is really about what problems do we have, or what things are, and do we struggle with, that we can potentially go, let's have a look, is RPA, can that solve it? Or also sometimes there's times where you want to be able to fix your system. So it's a really good opportunity to have a look at processes in detail and have a look at it, and then see what you can do and then automate it. So, very much it's rules-based. So it's not super smart. It's not AI. It is robotics process automation. So it will take data based on a set of rules. So the inputs could be files or an Excel file or a PDF, and it will, extract that data and it will do what you tell it to do. And so high volume manual processes are particularly suitable to RPA, and finance is a particularly rich area in businesses that do tend to have to do a lot of manual processes.
Yeah. Interesting to talk about how it interfaces with the existing infrastructure. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, so there are numerous. It's software, so it just needs to be installed, and then basically using how you would set up a person is the best way to think of it, is how it then interacts with all the systems. So we need to have an email. If we're going to receive emails, we need to have an email account for the robot, for the RPA software, and then we'll program that all the way through. So that is a really particularly powerful thing, because you can just go, okay, if we want it to have access to the ERP, we can really restrict the access, because it's essentially the same user access that you would use a user. So, other than installing the particular software on your, in your company, after that, it's really very simple. So it's a very business-driven technology, which I think is really fantastic. So it's very simple.
So, and the data comes from the RPA into the ERP's established user interface, electronic interface.
Yeah, so generally what would happen, there would be an input. So it might, as an example, if we're doing a manual data entry, so, and I can talk through an example that I implemented, which was about setting up project codes. So a form, an electronic form came into an email, and then the RPA read, it monitored that email box, picked up the email, and then read the attachment, and then did a certain number of steps. So, and in that example, logged into the system, the ERP, entered the data, it created a new code, it then went back to the form, saved the form on a network, updated the form with the code, saved it as a PDF, and then emailed it back to whoever submitted the form. So very simple, very quick process, quite elegant. It was fantastic, and that particular company processed a couple of thousand of those types of forms within a year, and it just took away so much data entry and processing and speeded it up, and it was a really exciting kind of win.
So, and in that instance, I'm assuming it was not just the benefit to the finance team, but it's often the operational part of the business that has a flow-on effect, either in these, because most of the time it's not just core finance processing, but it's always the interactions of various parts of operations with finance, where that handover point can be supported by a solution like this.
Yeah. So in that particular example that I implemented, it was around project accounting, so project codes and the budgets. So there was, across the business, there was different types of these projects happening, OPEX, CAPEX, and some, kind of operational upgrades. And so there was actually different forms with different data, and they all came through. And the really nice thing, and as a project manager that had to submit forms occasionally to spend some money, the speed of getting it back was really great. So, I think we went from generally it was a 2-day turnaround to it was like, within a few hours. And that just not having to go, oh, I've got to see if I've got that yet, was really beneficial, and it benefited the whole organisation. It was a great win.
Just on that, while we're talking about a solution like that, what sort of time frame did you experience in implementing something like that? We're talking a 1-month project or a 6-month project? Can you just talk through the time frame from identifying the opportunity to getting it in place?
Yeah, so it was part of a larger kind of transformation, and it was one of the tools that was, we were keen to pilot to see how that happened. And so from the discussions, and it was working with, so I was working as project manager, we worked with finance and IT, and so overall it was probably 5 or 6 months overall, but the actual implementation was a lot shorter. So there's numerous actual software. So, we had a process where we looked at the different ones and worked out what would suit our business. And then we had a look at what's the first thing we want to do? What's the best thing? And we had some ideas, but once we talked about it with the finance team, that project accounting, the creation update of the project codes and budgets came out as let's do that. That's a really good example to try.
Mm-hmm.
So all up, it was probably 5 months, but the actual implementation, and we had some complexities. So there was 3 or 4 different forms, because there was 3 or 4 different types of things that had to be set up. And so that was probably about 3 months.
Right.
Okay, just conscious of time, I think we'll move on to the next question, and we start to get into the broader context here. So hopefully that's been a helpful level set. Good discussion. So as we push into the big idea and our topic around how RPA supports the wider transformation, or what do we mean when we say transformation? And maybe Andrew, if I could direct this question to you, please.
Well, transformation, as you know, is now become one of those new words that we like to use in organizations. I laugh at myself sometimes because it's a new word that wasn't around 5 or 6 years ago, and now it's become quite common. In fact, it's been part of my title for the last 3 or 4 roles, where it's all about digital and transformation. But in its most simplest terms, it's about improvement, and that's really what it comes down to. Transformation is improvement that brings about change, or the change that brings about improvement. And I think often we need to remind ourselves that that's what we mean by transformation. Often transformation is large scale, and I think if I look back at some of the programs of work, if you run a full-scale digital transformation in an organization, you could be up for a 2 to 3 year journey, which can be very daunting if you haven't embarked on one of those programs of work, and obviously it requires a lot more formal kind of processing and business cases and making sure the benefits are clearly tracked and that you're achieving those goals. I think, but people often forget that transformation can happen at various levels. So it can be at the tactical level, and I think this is where I believe the RPA tool set, the robotics process automation tool set, really kind of can start or kickstart some of this transformation journey that you need to go on. Sometimes you need to be able to solve specific problems. Sometimes it's the terminology of low-hanging fruit. You're looking for how you could gain some momentum. And I think that sometimes some organizations just need to be able to start somewhere, and using the RPA sort of tool set helps you to kind of make smaller changes and smaller improvements that kind of builds momentum in an organization, because sometimes you just need the confidence. I think the other element to it as well is that we need to remind ourselves that when we do transformation, we're changing people's lives, the behaviors and work practices. And I think sometimes doing it on a smaller scale helps to kind of work through that with people to get used to the ability to change. The last part that I think is helpful for us to kind of talk about transformation is that sometimes organizations have kind of made failures, and so there's an apprehension to make changes. So there's people are a bit gun shy. Let's not touch anything. Let's just leave things the way they are. And sometimes a smaller scale, cheaper solution over a shorter period of time can kind of build a little bit of confidence that you can make improvements that are valuable and have good outcomes. And I think if that's done in a positive way, it can build momentum towards medium to large scale transformation.
Look, I might just add one thing. I think in addition to meaning improvement, transformation also has the aspiration that we want to do things in a fundamentally different way. We're going to transform how we're going to do something. So we want to fundamentally change how we're doing it, because we know the way we're doing it at the moment ain't great. So how do we fix it fundamentally? And I think that's where RPA really fits into the transformation story. It is a fundamentally different way to handle volume processes or transactions, or repeatable processes. So it's a fundamentally different way of doing something.
All right. Well, segue to a question for you then, Peter, is really the context of challenges for the finance team. So what are the challenges facing finance teams seeking to move forward and make a shift on the dial in the performance of their function?
Look, again, it will depend on the organisation, but in the organisations I've been in that have had a finance area that was challenged and needed rapid improvement, the sort of issues that the impediments or challenges, the number one would be substandard legacy systems. So you got a substandard ERP that's probably been modified to an inch of its life and integrated with all sorts of other legacy systems in the company, and it's such a big job to replace that no one dares to touch it. So you've got this legacy system, and it's very hard to improve finance with poor systems. The second big impediment would be organisation inertia. So, often the inertia comes typically from, we've tried to change things in the past, it didn't work, and there's no enthusiasm to change things. So there's inertia, and it's probably based upon previously failed initiatives. And I think the third one is competing priorities in an organisation. Often you'll be an organisation that's got a challenged finance area, probably it's got some business challenges as well. So there's competing priorities in the business. And sometimes to really get to the core problem of finance performance, you have to rebuild stuff within the business. And there's just not the appetite to divert priorities to do that while there's sales to be made or production issues to sort out or other problems in the business.
And so when we think about, or maybe what's your view on how people regard the ERP upgrade as the panacea? And
yeah, the thing about an ERP upgrade is that if a system hasn't been modified much, an upgrade from version 1 to version 10, or whatever it might be, is no big deal. But invariably, an old legacy system's been modified, and an upgrade is essentially a replacement. And a replacement project for ERP is a big project. And it's a big project. You're probably to do it successfully, you're probably talking, in excess of 12 months, and you're talking about a lot of organizational disruption. Mm-hmm. So ERP replacement could solve a lot of the performance issues, but there's a heck of a lot of work needed to do it. And and there may not be the resources there to do it, and there may not be the time there to do it.
Mm. Getting to the sort of sharp end of things here, where does RPA fit in the scheme of things here, and what are the benefits? We've talked about some good case studies, but if we just sort of step back and talk more broadly about the landscape.
So where does RPA fit? Well, I think the real benefits are around, we can have some quick wins. One of the great things that we found when we were looking at what can we use RPA for is having a look at the current processes. So we knew we weren't going to change systems, so you use your existing systems. So we knew that, but we were able to, as looking at going, hey, what can we improve? Go, okay, how does it work? So it's very kind of operational, but, it was really good to have a look at how it works. So really around initially finance processing. So I think that's really where it can fit very well, because there is often high volume manual processes. The next thing is really, I think, around analysis and validation. So, you could use RPA to check, to compare data and check it before it then goes to that next step. And I think that's really an area around that whole reconciliations, month-end reconciliations. I think there's a lot of, areas where RPA could be of benefit to fit in. So around the processing, can get some quick wins, and we can leverage the existing systems. I think that's really where it fits, and free up people to do more value add work.
We've got a little list for you here, and you want to just sort of talk us broadly about the landscape?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a great list because it covers, a lot of the typical finance functions. And I think in particular, it's powerful where it's, the existing systems, either don't quite fit or there's been a workaround. So an example that I can talk through is around billing and invoicing. Another process we automated was a particular little part of the business that did some billing, but they didn't have a full-on system. So it actually came to finance in an Excel spreadsheet on a monthly basis. And then so that was, rather than being integrated, which is what you typically find if you've got systems up to date, but, it was a newer part of the business, and it didn't have its own system at that stage. So we knew that that was coming in the future, but at that stage, you know, these invoices still had to be entered and sent out. And that was a really, you know, that was a great opportunity to use automation. So we automated billing and invoicing, and it even emailed it out. So, and printed it. So it was all tasks that had previously been done manually. So someone had, you know, received the file, validated it, entered it, printed the invoices. And another, just a thing about that, which I think is probably important to point out, is that you can have the RPA do part of the process, and then a human can then, you know, step in and do another part, so an approval process, which what we did, and then it can then complete the process. So that saved a lot of time at month end, and it was a really great win. So there's lots of different examples, and it really does depend on the business and what challenges that they're having as to what the particular, you know, suitable point to start is. But, you know, there's heaps of examples all across finance, because, you know, every business has to, you know, we have to pay our suppliers, we have to bill our customers, we have to do general accounting. So every business has that type of, all these typical transactions happening. And I think that's a really great entry point, is to have a look. What are the pain points for your staff, for your finance staff?
Yeah. No,
and it will vary. So.
Yeah, all good. I mean, that case study sounds like an excellent fundamental benefit on day sales and managing your cash flow.
Yeah, and also at month end, actually, because again, that's where the crunch point comes for finance teams. And yeah, it did help. It reduced the amount of time that team had to spend. So it was fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. No, look, this list, it's almost like everyone's got their own favorites in the list. This is just a generic list of the most common. You know, we love talking about bank recs. We've done that a few times. We keep looking at that. The GL postings, the invoice ingestion's an obvious one, but it's almost like this is half the story. This is like the generic set common within the core, and then you've got all the peripheral interactions of finance to the business, and maybe that's an example that you've just talked about. So everyone's got their bespoke processes interact as part of their interaction with finance and the business. We'll just move on just to sort of recap and on the benefits. Anne, you want to lead us through this as it relates to finance?
Yeah, I think it's quite fairly clear around, you know, it's scalable. So one of the challenges, you know, when a business scales and they don't have the more staff, so that's where really RPA can really bring in some business improvement and free up staff. So yeah, we can see what's on here. And one of the other examples, or one of the other key things about RPA, is once it's programmed, it's really highly accurate. So the quality is high. So because it's just, you've given it a rule and then it's just processing it. So it really does improve quality and also the accuracy, and it's very transparent. So you can, you know, very auditable. So some of the benefits is really, you know, about engagement and, you know, being able to get rid of something that previously took up a lot of time and wasn't particularly value added. So I think it really can drive a lot of business improvement. And I think finance areas is a great place to start. It can certainly apply across a wider part of the business, but I think it's a particularly strong area to start looking at using RPA.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think statistically, the analysts tell us that the highest spend of any a corporate function within the enterprise is finance. The most amount of manual activity and mess is in finance. So it's proven. The data agrees. Okay. Anything to add there, Peter?
Oh, the thing that I'd add is that often you'd look at an ERP replacement project or any tech project and you say, oh, these are the sorts of benefits we're looking for. What's nice with RPA is you can get these benefits without having to completely uproot underlying infrastructure. And this bolts on, and it's something that can be deployed and add to what's already there.
Yeah.
And that's what's particularly exciting about RPA.
For those in the audience contemplating the finance business improvement, what are some of the things you'd suggest to people? Peter, and I know we've got a little sort of slide with a few prompters here. So what are the key success factors? Not exhaustive.
Not exhaustive. Look, I think for any improvement program, it's helpful for it to be rooted in from a business perspective. We're not doing any improvement project, if it's rooted in just making something nicer and easier for an individual, doesn't help you build broader business engagement. And you want to spend some money, you want to get outcomes which ultimately benefits the business.
Yep.
A key for finance improvement is to be able to leverage the available technology or the technology available to you. And that includes your existing infrastructure plus other technology that you can bring on board without disrupting that. Pareto principle is also a key. It's easy, particularly in finance, to get bogged down in trying to split the atom at times in the minutiae. For transformation to work, you need to get the big picture right and to focus on the 20% of actions or initiatives you can take that will drive, most of the benefit. And when that occurs, you're able to target quick wins, and quick wins builds confidence in the change program, and confidence is contagious. Success builds confidence, and confidence helps you roll out further improvements and build a continuous improvement culture. So they're the sorts of key success factors I'd say are needed for any sort of transformation project. And I think RPA can really help in that, particularly in an organisation that needs something done quickly. It doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to uproot your existing infrastructure. It can largely bolt onto what's already there.
So maybe I'll sort of go around the grounds to the others, and Peter, feel free to sort of add. But maybe firstly to Anne and then to Andrew. What else would you add to the list or of ideas around how to approach things to consider as part of an improvement program?
Yeah, I think it's key to look at what are the big pain points for that particular business. What is something that is, and have a look at it holistically. So, and see where can we actually make some wins. So it could be implementing another piece of software or whatever, or it could be, automating, or it could be changing the process. So I think it's really good to have a look at the process, understand the timing and the volumes. So if you can have a look at those things, and then they're really the ones that can be focused on and get the best bang for your buck. And that's certainly what we did when we were looking at which ones to do. And then there was also some quick wins, which was really fantastic. So automate some reports that, it's like, oh, can I, and you'd have people from the business going, oh, or from finance going, oh, could we use it for this? And then, so it was really that great continuous improvement culture that we cultivated, which was fantastic.
I think also using the ability to not, the square peg in a round hole. So, robotics process automation is a technology. It has instances where it works really well and other instances where it doesn't work well. So you've got to have the smarts around being able to select the right solution. So it won't solve massive problems. It is a short-term quick fix. It has its use, and I think that's where its value lies, in choosing those that ability to. So I'm not. What I'm trying to say is that you don't want to have, an RPA solution that's going to take you 6 months to build. That's not an RPA solution. An RPA solution is a tactical, short-term, quick fix, low cost. Otherwise, I think you're trying to stretch the technology beyond its capability. So I think it's a collection of smaller, quick wins where you utilize the solution to solve those kinds of problems, and I think that's where its value lies.
Time for a few questions. The first question here is from Srinanti. What is your perspective leveraging analytics in combination with RPA to estimate the benefits that can be achieved after a process is automated? Can you provide examples of this approach? Okay, so I think that's largely, I guess, analytics monitoring the performance on the operational side. Can I throw that?
Let me perhaps let me jump in on that one. So I think, again, it depends on the circumstances. If you've got a very mature organization, they'll have mature analytics, and you'll have good KPIs, and you'll have data that you could use to monitor that. That's an ideal situation. I think that the opposite end of the scale is also there, that sometimes you'll have organizations that have low levels of maturity and not accurate or high levels of performance analytics that gives you that monitoring. So you might have to put something in place, or you might have to do it a little bit more rudimentarily. But I think it's important that you do measure your success. I think that if you're going to implement an RPA project, that it should have benefits that you can track and you can trace. So I think there's a combination there. I'm trying to put the two markers behind. Yes, it's easy if it's there. If it's not there, you might have to put something in place to give you that ability to measure the benefits. Just
to speak to that, I think looking at how long the initial process took, the manual process took, and how long it takes under automation, or how much time is involved by a human, is a really, and volumes is a really, they're quite simple things that you can look at, and then the response time, like how quick is the turnaround, because that is quite often, is maybe not very easily measured, but it's quite a powerful thing to understand. So but I do think it's important to measure it, the performance, like what benefits are we getting, because it's a great story.
No, there's a lot of sort of technical lens on the tracking and the volumes processed by the bot, but it's the benefit and the impact is the real key to be drawing out of the analytics.
And talking about finance spaces, and this might be a bit tongue in cheek towards Peter, but I'm yet to find any CFO who wants to spend money if they're not going to get a benefit or return from it. I'd be surprised if Peter would want to spend any money on a project where he goes, I'm not going to see the results, or have some way of validating it.
Absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Okay, all right, good question, thank you. Maybe another question is really, how do people get started? What are the sort of, what would our counsel be for anyone seeking to get started and start the journey? What do they do?
Other than call you up?
Other than call us up.
I think one of the key in the journey is to identifying that you've got some potential improvement is the first part. And any repetitive task where you've got too many, you're identifying people, doing repetitive tasks that is a candidate for this. And I think investigate the opportunity. And if there's sufficient prize in terms of resource savings, this solution pays for itself. And I think that's the starting point. Is the first point is to identify where some quick wins are. Quick wins that will pay for itself.
Yeah,
and that starts you on the journey.
Yeah. And I think to empower the finance team to kind of go, oh, actually, these areas are the ones that, we want to improve is really great. And it's a really great opportunity to get, the finance team involved and go, yeah, we want to drive change. So
but I'm yet to find a team of people where if you're doing mundane, and the phrase can be seen as inappropriate, but donkey work, where you're doing the same thing every day and it's just the same repetitive stuff. If you give those individuals the opportunity to move towards more high value work where it's not the repeated same task and they can be taken away from them and they can do some of the other work that is obviously always available in an organization, that has a huge impetus on the culture of a team, especially when they realize that they can move towards more important work, supporting the business rather than just doing the manual processing.
That's a good point, because quite often it's actually rare that we see any cost takeout. It's all about value add to the business, better use of people. Everyone wants to be better utilized, right? So it is really all of that, the value add to the people and the better roles and the better stimulation of brain for the people and contribution and the better value to the business, partnering with the business. So I think that's been a great session, and we will be running more sessions over the coming months. So please attend if you have the time, and hopefully you found this session constructive. All right, thank you again, and we'll see you next time.